have more exclusive information now on a story we brought to you on the program yesterday on the significant policy to change on double bunking in federal prisons. That's the policy of putting two prisoners in a cell designed for one. Correctional Services of Canada has rewritten its policy directive on housing two inmates in a single cell. But Power and Politics has obtained new documents to access to information that show surprising trends associated with that practice. Take a look at this memo from Correctional Services. Quote, CSC recognizes that there are risks associated with the use of double bunking. Placing two inmates in a cell decreases privacy and dignity, which may contribute to increased tensions, decreases personal safety and institutional security, and provides less effective movement and control. The problem is that's not the whole story. There are now doubts about the rise of violence. Is there a link between double bunking and violence? Maybe not. Why is the Correctional Services of Canada changing its policy months after it clearly identified some of the dangers with that practice? Do they have new information? Will the new practice fuel violence among inmates or not? What's going on with the new normal inside Canada's prisons? Joining me now from the foyer of the House of Commons, Candice Bergen, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, Jack Harris, NDP Defence Critic, and Liberal Public Safety Critic, Francis Scarpaleggia. Good to see all of you back.
Thank you.
Candice Bergen, let me start with you. Commissioner of Corrections warned the Minister of Public Safety 5 months ago of the risks of double bunking, yet we showed our audience yesterday on Power and Politics this directive that we obtained that says the single occupancy accommodation is the most desirable and correctionally appropriate method of housing offenders. That was in the old directive. It was removed from the new commissioner's directives that we obtained. Why was that removed?
Well, the commissioner himself creates this document. The minister's office, there's no political involvement in the creation of this document. But if you look at the document, I think it's actually, it's a good one. I think that when you look at, I have it in front of me, the main policy objective to provide reasonable, safe, secure, and humane accommodations that support correctional interventions. It then goes on to very specifically talk about the issue of single occupancy. Population management strategies must include single occupancy when feasible. Where single occupancy is not possible, shared accommodation or double bunking accommodations will be utilized. And then on page 7, there's a thorough criteria set out when double bunking is used. There's a whole set of criteria that they need to go through before they put two people together. So I think that it's clear that the commissioner takes this very seriously. He's looking at the job that CSC has to do when they're accommodating inmates. I think it's a good directive when you look at the whole directive, Evan.
But two things on it. First, the original principle was that it was only in exceptional circumstances for double bunking. Now it seems that the cap has gone from 10 to 20%, and it seems now that it will be used more routinely. A couple questions on that. First of all, why does the system need more double bunking if indeed you're supposed to have new units coming online, and those units were supposed to mitigate the need for double bunking? What does that tell us?
Well, first of all, you're correct. The directive says double bunking will not exceed 20% of the overall regional rated capacity.
It can exceed it at special requests, right?
Any increase above that level would require the commissioner's approval. But I think that, again, the directive is very clear that single occupancy is the desired outcome. But you know, Evan, it's clear when the commissioner is planning, when they're planning for how they're going to be working and how they're operating over the next several years, if double bunking is necessary, and again, it's a common practice in Western countries, they have to be ready for it. And this directive is very clear in their criteria. So it's not just let's use double bunking, let's put two very violent people together. No, and again, if you have it in front of you, page 7, they have to look at compatibility, they have to look at vulnerability, they have to look at predatory permissive behavior, and there's explanations on each one of those. It's taken very seriously. It's part of their operational planning, and this directive shows, again, that they're taking it seriously. The ideal outcome, again, is to provide a safe, secure place for these individuals to be corrected, and the public to be protected. But these are criminals. They need to be protected, but they also need to be corrected.
Right. So let me start with you, Jack Harris. Yesterday, I had the Correctional Investigator Howard Sapers on. He raised concerns that this could endanger other inmates because it could raise the rate of violence and other issues. And he said this is making an exceptional practice normative. So he was quite critical of it. Nonetheless, I want to show our viewers and I want to show you the same access to information request we've got today. New details. We received a briefing note to the Minister of Public Safety from the Commissioner of Correctional Services Canada, Don Head. He wrote this in September of 2012. They actually did what's called an analysis of double bunking and violent incidents. And he says, quote, as a result of this study, CSC concludes that double bunking has minimal impact on the rates of violence in institutions. It says the data shows violent incidents are independent from the levels of double bunking. The point here is if CSC is saying that, are you still concerned that double bunking shouldn't be used here if CSC's new study says it doesn't affect violent rates at all?
Well, first of all, I haven't seen the study, but it may be the one that was referred to by a spokesperson for Minister Tays, who said there was a study done in the prairies. So I don't know what the extent of it is, and
it is that same study, September 12, 2000.
That may not give us the whole picture, but Candice Bergen made a lot of quotes, so I'd like to make a quote from what she said on this show last March when we were talking about the Collins Bay Institution, and she said that that there's no plans for double bunking. Any plans are temporary and just good planning. This is when we were talking about them designing a prison for double bunking. We're not double bunking on a permanent basis, she said. In fact, right now we don't even need to. But here we have a situation where it's pretty clear that the plans for the government are to have double bunking on an ordinary basis and single bunking on an exceptional basis. That's why they have the rules. This is contrary to the United Nations minimum standards for prisons that we've signed on to, frankly, and they cavalierly say, oh, this is a common practice in Western countries. I haven't seen any international studies that actually say that. We've got studies by the Union of Correctional Officers who are very concerned about this. They say it's dangerous. They say we're going to be giving up on the whole process of rehabilitating and re-socializing prisoners, and that we're actually going to be warehousing them until we send them back out on the street, and I would say in much the same condition as they come in. Sure, this is wrong for society, both on a moral basis in terms of our plans for rehabilitating prisoners, but also it's dangerous for society. The UCCS also say it's dangerous. Howard Sapers says it's dangerous, and others say it's dangerous. So one study does not overturn the United Nations minimum standards or all of the correctional practice that we've been undertaking for many, many years.
Right. We've been trying to get to the bottom of this for a long time, Francis Scarpaleggia, and here we have, first CSC had these basic principles that it was safer and better to have single bunking, not double bunking. Then, because of some of the questioning, they did an analysis of double bunking and violent incidents. I'm reading it straight from the report we just got, and it said their study, this is from Don Head of CSC, they don't see any link. And in fact, at one point they say, in other words, certain institutions with high levels of double bunking had low rates of violence and vice versa. What does that, given what CSC is now saying in this document, does that change your view on the use of double bunking?
Well, not really. First of all, I think that this study should be made public, and it should be peer-reviewed, if you will. I mean, the study's being done by the person or the department that has a stake in justifying double bunking, and it seems to be building a case to support double bunking. So I think it should be made public. As Jack was saying, there is an international standard. There's an international standard, presumably for a reason, and so I don't think this study, overturns the need for the international standard. What I find interesting is that we do have criteria for matching inmates in situations of double bunking. That's fine, but why does that create the need to change the directive? And the directive, quite frankly, is full of very subjective terms, like where feasible. Well, what does that mean? I mean, if there isn't any room, then it's feasible to double bunk. So I think that there are a lot of layers of the onion, if you will, to peel here.
Candice Bergen, what about mentally ill inmates? There's no exemption in the new directive for double bunking for mentally ill inmates. Howard Sapers raised that question, one of his concerns. Why isn't there rules around that?
Well, clearly, I mean, if you look at the criteria set up on page 6, clearly that would be part of it. When you're looking at the issue of vulnerability, you're looking at compatibility. But I have to go back to something.
Sorry, but that's not for the 20%, right?
it's for all the inmates. So if they're looking at double bunking, there's a clear criteria set up before they put two inmates together. But I have to go back to what both of these gentlemen said. To somehow suggest that Corrections Service Canada, which by the way is a leader in the world for the corrections facilities and the programs that we offer, to suggest that they would falsify information or somehow doctor this study, which you clearly have seen yourself, Evan, is actually very regrettable. And to say that the UN is going to tell Canada how to operate prisons when Canada are leaders.
We signed on to these standards, Candice.
And we are following. Sorry, Jack,
don't jump on the bandwagon
you're
of
interrupting me,
conservative
Jack.
bashing of
You're
the
good at that.
UN,
You're good
please.
at that, Jack. No, you are bashing Corrections Service Canada, and frankly, that's appalling. When you look at the men and women and the commissioner himself, you look at who conducted this study. It's a credible study. You might not like the results, Jack, but the results say that double bunking and violence are not linked.
It is.
And we
I
also
have to tell you, just on that, it's true that study says that, but in the ATIP documents we've got, Ann Kelly, who's the assistant commissioner at CSC, wrote Howard Sapers a letter on the 30th of September. After that came out, and I'm quoting her letter. So there's a lot of mixed messages here, and says here very specifically, single accommodation is the most desirable and correctionally appropriate method for accommodating offenders. So on one hand, you've got what CSC is saying, and then literally weeks later, the assistant commissioner is telling Howard Sapers, the watchdog, that it's the most appropriate. So I guess the question here is, why is there so many mixed messages on what's appropriate and what's safe?
I don't think it's mixed at all. I think it's very clear that ideally an inmate would be able to be in a cell by themselves. That would be part of the plan. There are a lot of other ideals that would be hopefully be able to be attained in a correctional facility. Sometimes there's a necessity. You can only go up to 20% for a double bunking situation. In that case, there's very clear criteria to be set out so that at the end of the day, the best case scenario happens, whether that's single occupancy or double occupancy, that these individuals are safe, secure, and they're able to be corrected. I don't think there's any mixed messages, and certainly no conspiracy to double bunk all of the inmates.
Well,
I think that's the other fact.
2 years ago, before the Conservatives got control of the agenda of filling up the prisons, the Correctional Service of Canada said that double bunking was
what you thought.
Let me
Jack
finish.
Harris, go ahead.
That double bunking was inappropriate. Inappropriate was the word. As a permanent solution. And now we've got a situation where there was an incident in Calgary a couple of days ago where there was triple bunking going on. So we now make double bunking the norm, and then the exceptional will be triple bunking. This is what some of the policies of this Conservative government are leading to, and it's dangerous. And the men and women who work in the prisons, by the way, the union responsible for them and all of the workers, they say that this double bunking is dangerous, and they're worried about what will happen.
I suggest Jack read the study. He said he didn't read the
to
study.
be fair, there
has
has clearly been a change. In the old directive that we got, 2001, it does say it was inappropriate. In the new one, that's changed. I got less.
Evidence-based policy.
I don't understand why.
Evidence-based policy.
I got less than a minute here, very quickly.
Yeah,
and Francis Scarpaleggia, the government says it has plans to build 2,700 new cells to ease the pressure from the closure of institutions like Kingston and Leclerc. Do you believe that these new studies around double bunking mean that the government may not build those 2,700? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, the government's been the government for what, 7 years now, and you know, one would think that this work would be accomplished by now. So you know, will we see the 2,700, or will the government say, look, we don't have the money, and then the commissioner will say, well, look, it's not feasible to have only single bunking, so we're going to have double bunking. You know, it becomes a bit of a charade after a while. So I don't know. I mean, where are those 2,700?
The accused of building more prisons, and now they're questioning where they are.
We're saying we don't need more prisons. There are a lot of people in prison who shouldn't be there.
I got to leave it there on this. We continue to have this debate about this. I wonder, we'll be making this study that we've got here, some of this public on CBC, but of course we'll get, pardon me, continued reaction. Candice Bergen, Jack Harris, Francis Scarpaleggia. Always good to have the three of you on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan.